The phone rang at 3:47 a.m., cutting through the silence of Maya Chen's studio apartment like a blade through paper. She fumbled for her hearing aids on the nightstand, her fingers trembling not from the cold November air seeping through the cracked window, but from the familiar dread that accompanied unexpected calls at this hour. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but the area code was local. Baltimore, Maryland, where everything in her life seemed to unravel these days. Miss Chen? The voice was professional, clipped, with the kind of authority that made her stomach drop. This is Agent Rebecca Torres with the Social Security Administration's Office of Inspector General. I need to speak with you regarding irregularities in your disability benefit account. Maya's world tilted. She pressed her back against the headboard of her twin bed, the metal frame cold through her threadbare pajamas. The cramped apartment suddenly felt even smaller, barely 400 square feet of peeling paint and water stains that had become her entire universe since the accident 2 years ago. Her eyes found the stack of unopened bills on the folding table that served as her desk, kitchen counter, and dining room all at once. Irregularities? Maya's voice cracked. She cleared her throat and tried again. I don't understand. What kind of irregularities? Ma'am, we have evidence that someone has been fraudulently accessing and redirecting your disability payments. The investigation has been ongoing for 3 weeks. We need you to come in tomorrow, today actually, at 10 a.m. Do you have transportation to our field office on North Charles Street? The words hit Maya like physical blows. Fraudulently accessing her disability payments. The $1,247 monthly check that was literally the difference between having a roof over her head and sleeping in her beat-up Honda Civic in the parking lot of the community college where she used to work as a counselor for students with disabilities before the drunk driver ran the red light and changed everything. Yes, I can get there. Maya's mind raced. She hadn't received her October payment, and November's was already 5 days late. She'd called twice, sitting on hold for over an hour each time, only to be told there were processing delays and to call back if it wasn't resolved within 10 business days. She assumed it was another bureaucratic nightmare, the kind she had become intimately familiar with since filing for Social Security disability insurance 18 months ago. Miss Chen, I need to ask you directly, do you live alone? Yes. The word came out as barely a whisper. And you haven't given anyone access to your banking information or authorized anyone to receive payments on your behalf? No, absolutely not. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. Agent Torres, what exactly? We'll discuss everything in detail tomorrow. Bring any documentation you have regarding your disability claim, bank statements from the past 6 months, and a valid photo ID. And, Miss Chen, don't discuss this conversation with anyone until after our meeting. The line went dead. Maya sat in the darkness, her hearing aids picking up every sound. The hum of the ancient refrigerator, the drip of the leaky faucet she couldn't afford to fix, the muffled argument from the apartment upstairs where Mrs. Patterson was having another fight with her son about his drinking. These sounds had become the soundtrack of her isolation, but tonight they felt different, ominous. She reached for her phone again and scrolled to her recent calls. The last incoming call had been 4 days ago. Her sister Jessica asking if Maya had figured out the payment thing yet and if she needed help dealing with Social Security. At the time, Maya had been grateful for Jessica's concern. Her older sister had always been the responsible one, the successful one, the one their parents called when they needed something handled efficiently. Jessica Chen Morrison lived in a sprawling colonial in Potomac, Maryland, with her husband Derek and their 2 teenage daughters. She drove a BMW SUV and wore designer clothes to her job as a marketing director for a pharmaceutical company. When Maya had her accident, a traumatic brain injury and spinal damage from a 3-car collision that left her with chronic pain, cognitive issues, and partial hearing loss, Jessica was the one to visit the hospital every day. She'd helped Maya navigate the initial paperwork for disability benefits, had even offered to let Maya stay in their guest room during the worst of her recovery. But Maya had been too proud, too determined to maintain her independence. She'd found this apartment instead, using the small settlement from her car insurance to scrape together first and last month's rent. The place wasn't much, a converted basement in a Victorian house that had seen better decades, but it was hers. The landlord, Mr. Kowalski, was a Polish immigrant in his 70s who understood struggle and had been patient when Maya's disability approval was delayed for months. Now, sitting in the pre-dawn darkness, Maya felt the walls of her tiny world closing in. Someone had been accessing her payments. Someone who knew her well enough to pull off fraud that had apparently been sophisticated enough to fool Social Security systems for weeks, maybe months. She padded to the small bathroom and flipped on the harsh fluorescent light. The mirror showed her what she'd become, a 32-year-old woman who looked a decade older, her black hair grown out from the pixie cut she'd maintained when she was working, now hanging limp to her shoulders. Dark circles under brown eyes that had once sparkled with the passion she'd brought to helping her students navigate college with their various challenges. Now those same eyes reflected back exhaustion, pain, and something new, fear. Maya splashed cold water on her face and tried to think clearly. The cognitive issues from her brain injury made complex problem-solving difficult, especially when she was stressed. Her thoughts felt like they were moving through thick fog, connections slow to form. But one thing crystallized with horrible clarity. Whoever had done this knew intimate details about her situation. They'd have needed her Social Security number, banking information, maybe even access to her mail. She walked back to the main room and stood before the bulletin board she'd mounted next to her bed, an organizational system she'd developed to help manage her memory problems. Important documents, appointment reminders, medication schedules, all color-coded and precisely arranged. Her eyes found the corner where she kept copies of important mail, including the letters from Social Security. Maya's hands shook as she pulled down a letter dated 3 weeks ago, the same time frame Agent Torres had mentioned for the investigation. It was a standard form notice about updates to your account information. She'd barely glanced at it when it arrived, assuming it was routine bureaucracy. Now she read it carefully, and her blood ran cold. The notice referenced changes to the designated representative payee for her account. She'd never authorized a representative payee. Representative payee was a designation for people who couldn't manage their own finances, elderly people with dementia, individuals with severe intellectual disabilities, people in psychiatric facilities. Maya had cognitive challenges, yes, but she was fully capable of managing her own money. She'd never requested or authorized anyone to handle her benefits. But someone had convinced Social Security otherwise. Maya's phone buzzed with a text message. Jessica. Hey sis, hope you're sleeping better. Remember, if you need anything at all, I'm here. Family takes care of family. Heart. The heart emoji at the end felt like a knife twist. Maya stared at the message, her mind working slowly through the implications. Jessica had been asking about her payment issues. Jessica had offered help with Social Security paperwork. Jessica knew about Maya's cognitive struggles and memory problems. Jessica had access to Maya's apartment. She still had the spare key from when she'd helped Maya move in. But this was Jessica, her sister, the person who'd held her hand during the worst nights in the hospital, who'd helped her learn to walk again, who'd celebrated with tears of joy when Maya finally received her disability approval, the person who sent encouraging texts and left care packages outside Maya's door when Maya was too depressed to answer the phone. Maya set the phone down and walked to her small desk. In the bottom drawer, beneath a stack of medical records, she kept a small jewelry box, a gift from their grandmother before she died. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was the emergency credit card Jessica had given her 6 months ago. Just in case, Jessica had said, you never know when you might need it. Maya had never used it. She'd been too proud, too determined to make it on her own. But now she wondered, was it connected to Jessica's account? Could transactions be monitored? Could Jessica see if and when Maya might have used it?
The apartment felt suddenly stifling. Maya grabbed her jacket and stepped outside, breathing in the sharp November air. The neighborhood was quiet, most of the residents of the converted Victorian house asleep. She walked to the small covered porch where residents sometimes left packages or notes. Mr. Kowalski had installed a mailbox for each unit, and Maya checked hers compulsively, another behavior she developed since her injury. The need to maintain control over the small details she could still manage. Tonight, her mailbox was empty, but she noticed something that made her stomach lurch. The lock looked different, scratched, as if someone had been trying different keys or had forced it open. Maya ran her fingers over the metal, feeling the tiny scrapes and marks that hadn't been there before. She thought about the past few months, reviewing every interaction with Jessica through this new lens of suspicion. The sister who'd insisted on helping with paperwork, who'd suggested Maya might be overwhelmed while managing finances while dealing with her recovery, who'd asked detailed questions about Maya's daily routines, when she checked mail, when she went to appointments. Maya walked back inside and sat on her bed, pulling her laptop onto her knees. Her fingers moved slowly over the keyboard. Typing was still difficult, another lingering effect of her injuries. She logged into her bank account, something she did obsessively several times a day since her payments had stopped coming. The screen loaded, showing her pitiful balance, $127.83. But tonight she noticed something she'd somehow missed before. In the transaction history, going back 3 months, were several small withdrawals she didn't remember making. $25 here, $50 there. Never enough to trigger alerts or seem alarming individually, but adding up to several $100s over time. Each withdrawal was labeled as coming from ATM locations she'd never visited, one in Potomac, Maryland, less than 2 miles from Jessica's house. Maya's hands trembled as she reached for her purse. Inside, her wallet held her debit card, her driver's license, her insurance cards. But as she looked more closely at the debit card, she noticed the magnetic strip looked worn, more than it should given how rarely she used it. The numbers along the bottom seemed slightly faded. Someone had been using her card. Someone who'd had access to it long enough to create a duplicate or had somehow obtained her banking information. Someone who knew her well enough to steal small amounts that wouldn't trigger immediate suspicion. Maya closed her laptop and lay back on her bed, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a map of some unknown country. Tomorrow, she would sit across from Agent Torres and learn the full extent of what had been done to her. Tomorrow, she would have to confront the possibility that the person she'd trusted most, the person who'd been her lifeline through the darkest period of her life, had been systematically stealing from her. But tonight, she lay in the darkness and tried to understand how Jessica, successful, wealthy Jessica, who'd never wanted for anything, could have done this to her disabled sister. What kind of desperation or greed or twisted logic could justify taking money from someone who had so little? The heating unit kicked on with a groan, pushing warm air through the small apartment. Maya pulled her blanket up to her chin and closed her eyes. But sleep seemed impossible. In a few hours, she would walk into the Social Security Administration building and begin the process of learning just how deep this betrayal went.
Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows and carrying the scent of coming snow. Winter was approaching, and Maya realized with crystalline clarity that she was about to enter the coldest season of her life, one where the person she'd counted on most for warmth had been the one stealing the fuel that kept her alive. Her phone buzzed one more time. Another text from Jessica. "Sweet dreams, little sis. Tomorrow's a new day." Maya turned the phone face down and tried not to think about what tomorrow would bring. Maya's alarm went off at 7 a.m., though she'd been awake since 5, staring at the ceiling and running through scenarios in her mind. Each possibility felt worse than the last. She moved slowly through her morning routine, each step requiring conscious effort, another lingering effect of her traumatic brain injury that made automatic tasks feel like climbing mountains.
First, her medications. Maya had learned to organize them in a weekly pill organizer after spending 3 days in the hospital the previous year from accidentally double dosing her pain medication. The plastic compartments held a rainbow of pills: white tablets for chronic pain, blue capsules for inflammation, small yellow circles for the depression that had settled over her like fog after the accident. She dry swallowed them with practiced efficiency, then moved to the bathroom. The shower was lukewarm at best, another casualty of living in a converted basement, but the water helped clear some of the anxiety fog from her mind. Maya shampooed her hair carefully, avoiding the scar along her hairline where the doctors had relieved pressure on her brain during emergency surgery. 2 years later, the area was still tender, still a daily reminder of how quickly a life could change. She dressed in her best outfit, a navy blue blazer she'd worn to job interviews before her accident, paired with black slacks that were now too loose around her waist. Maya had lost nearly 30 pounds since her injury, partly from medication side effects, partly from the way depression had stolen her appetite. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror and tried to see the professional she used to be, the woman who'd commanded respect in meetings with college administrators and had been considered for a promotion to Director of Disability Services. That woman felt like a stranger now. Maya made coffee with the small French press Jessica had given her last Christmas, another gift she now viewed with suspicion. Had it been genuine kindness or part of a long-term plan to make Maya dependent on her sister's generosity? The coffee was bitter, but the caffeine helped sharpen her focus. She would need every advantage today. While the coffee cooled, Maya gathered the documents Agent Torres had requested: her disability award letter, a document she'd once celebrated receiving, proof that the system recognized her limitations weren't her choice or fault, bank statements showing her meager balance and the mysterious withdrawals, medical records documenting her injuries: traumatic brain injury with cognitive sequelae, chronic pain syndrome, partial hearing loss, and depression with anxiety. Looking at the medical files brought back memories of the months after her accident, when she had had to fight for every benefit, every accommodation. The insurance company had tried to claim her injuries weren't as severe as documented. The Disability Determination Office initially denied her claim, forcing her to hire a lawyer who took a quarter of her back benefits as payment. Through it all, Jessica had been there, helping her organize paperwork, driving her to appointments, advocating for her with medical professionals who sometimes treated Maya like she was exaggerating her symptoms. Maya remembered one particular doctor's appointment about 6 months after the accident. She had been struggling to explain her cognitive issues to a neurologist who seemed skeptical about her reported memory problems. Maya's words got tangled up, her thoughts scattered, and she started crying from frustration. Jessica had stepped in, clearly and professionally explaining Maya's symptoms, advocating for additional testing, making sure Maya's voice was heard. "My sister used to be one of the most articulate people I knew," she told the doctor. "She helped hundreds of students navigate college despite their disabilities. She understood
Systems and bureaucracy better than anyone. If she's telling you something is wrong, something is wrong." That memory made the current situation even more painful. Jessica had understood Maya's vulnerabilities better than anyone else. She'd seen firsthand how the brain injury affected Maya's ability to process complex information, to remember details, to advocate for herself. Jessica had been witness to Maya's struggles with executive function, the way simple tasks like managing finances could become overwhelming when combined with pain and cognitive fatigue. Maya finished her coffee and checked her phone. No new messages from Jessica, which was unusual. Her sister typically sent good morning texts with inspirational quotes or links to articles about recovery and resilience. The silence felt ominous. At 8:30, Maya called a taxi. She couldn't drive to the Social Security office. Her car had been totaled in the accident, and while she'd technically been cleared to drive again, the combination of her medications and intermittent cognitive issues made her nervous behind the wheel. The taxi ride across Baltimore took 25 minutes,
giving Maya time to think about the questions Agent Torres might ask. The Social Security Administration building was a fortress of concrete and glass, designed to project authority and permanence. Maya had been there twice before, once during the initial application process, and again when she'd had to appeal the first denial. Both times, Jessica had accompanied her, helping her navigate the Byzantine system and keeping her calm when the bureaucracy became overwhelming. Today, Maya walked through the metal detectors alone. Agent Rebecca Torres was younger than Maya had expected, probably mid-30s, with shoulder-length brown hair and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. Her office was small but organized, with case files stacked neatly on her desk and a computer screen that she angled away from Maya's view. "Thank you for coming in, Miss Chen. I know the situation must be confusing and frightening." Agent Torres's voice was professional but not unkind. "Before we begin, I want you to know that you're not in trouble. You're the victim in this case." Victim. The word hit Maya harder than she had expected. She'd been a victim of the drunk driver who destroyed her life. She'd been a victim of an insurance system that fought her claims. Now she was the victim of someone she'd trusted completely. "Can you walk me through your typical process for receiving and managing your disability benefits?" Agent Torres pulled out a yellow legal pad and prepared to take notes. Maya explained her routine: the direct deposit to her checking account on the third Wednesday of each month, her careful budgeting to make the $1,247 stretch to cover rent, utilities, food, and medication copays. She described how she checked her bank balance multiple times daily, partly from anxiety and partly because her memory issues made her worry she'd forgotten transactions. "When did you first notice problems with your payments?" "October's payment never came. When I called, they said they were processing delays. I called again the first week of November, and they said the same thing." Maya's hands twisted in her lap. Social Security has bureaucratic delays all the time. I've dealt with them for almost 2 years." Agent Torres made notes, then pulled out a thick file. "Miss Chen, someone filed paperwork 6 weeks ago requesting that you be assigned a representative payee due to your brain injury affecting your ability to manage finances. The request was accompanied by medical documentation and was approved." Maya's world tilted. "That's impossible. I never requested a representative payee. I never signed any papers." "The person who filed the request claimed that you'd asked for help managing your benefits due to confusion and memory problems related to your injury. They provided what appeared to be your signature on the necessary forms." Agent Torres slid a document across the desk. Maya stared at her own signature, or something that looked remarkably like it, on a form requesting that Jessica Chen Morrison be designated as her representative payee. "That's not my signature." Maya's voice was barely a whisper. It looks like it could be, but I never signed this. I never even saw this form before today." "We believe someone practiced forging your signature. The handwriting analysis isn't conclusive. It's sophisticated forgery, probably done by someone who'd seen your signature many times and had access to documents you'd signed." Agent Torres leaned forward. "Miss Chen, who has access to your apartment?" "My landlord has a key for emergencies, and—" Maya's throat felt tight. "My sister has one too. She helped me move in, and I gave her a spare key in case of medical emergencies." "Jessica Chen Morrison." "Yes." The name felt like broken glass in Maya's mouth. Agent Torres pulled out another document. "Your sister began receiving your disability payments 6 weeks ago. The money has been deposited into a separate account she established ostensibly for managing your care. According to bank records, she's withdrawn cash regularly and made payments that don't appear to be related to your living expenses." Maya stared at the bank statements Agent Torres showed her. Jessica had received $2,494 over the past 6 weeks, Maya's October and November payments. The withdrawals were itemized: $400 cash withdrawal at an ATM in Potomac, $150 payment to Bella Vista Salon and Spa, $85 at Roberto's Fine Dining, $200 cash withdrawal, $120 at Nordstrom. She's been using my disability money for salon visits and expensive dinners, Maya said flatly. The betrayal felt surreal, like watching someone else's life unfold on a movie screen. It appears so. There were also several smaller cash withdrawals over the past 3 months from your original account before the representative payee arrangement went into effect. We believe she was using a cloned debit card to steal smaller amounts while setting up the larger fraud. Agent Torres showed Maya photographs of ATM surveillance footage, grainy images of a woman with dark hair using Maya's debit card. The woman was wearing designer clothes and driving a luxury SUV. Even in the poor quality images, Maya recognized her sister. "How long has this been going on?" Maya asked. Based on the ATM footage and banking records, at least 3 months for the smaller thefts. The representative payee fraud began 6 weeks ago. Agent Torres's expression was sympathetic but businesslike. "Miss Chen, I need to ask some difficult questions about your relationship with your sister." Maya nodded, though the room felt like it was spinning slightly. "Has she ever suggested that you're incapable of managing your finances?" Maya tried to think clearly through the fog of betrayal and shock. "She's expressed concern about my memory problems. Sometimes I do forget things, bills, appointments, whether I've taken medication. It's part of my brain injury." "Has she offered to help manage your money?" "A few times. She gave me a credit card for emergencies and said I should consider letting her help with budgeting. But I wanted to maintain my independence." I laughed bitterly. I was so proud of managing on my own. "Did she have access to your medical records or documentation about your cognitive issues?" "She came to most of my doctor appointments in the first year after my accident. She helped me understand treatment plans when my brain fog was really bad. She even spoke to doctors on my behalf when I couldn't find the words. She knew exactly how my injury affected me. She knew my limitations better than anyone."
Agent Torres made more notes. "We believe she used that knowledge to commit fraud, both by forging documents that claimed you were incapable of managing your finances and by timing her thefts for when your cognitive issues would make you less likely to notice discrepancies immediately." Maya thought about the past few months, how Jessica had been so attentive, so concerned about Maya's well-being, the texts checking on her mental health, the care packages left outside her door, the offers of help with paperwork and bureaucracy. It had all felt like love, but now Maya wondered if it had been surveillance. Jessica monitoring Maya's state of mind, her awareness levels, her ability to detect the theft. "What happens now?" Maya asked. "We'll restore your benefits immediately. You should see your October and November payments, plus this month's, deposited within 48 hours. We're also working with the bank to recover whatever funds can be retrieved from the account your sister established." "And Jessica?" Agent Torres's expression hardened. "She's facing federal charges for Social Security fraud, identity theft, and theft of government funds. This isn't a family disagreement, Miss Chen. This is a serious federal crime. Your sister could face up to 5 years in prison and substantial fines." Maya felt like she was floating outside her own body, watching this conversation happen to someone else. Jessica in prison. Her successful, respectable sister facing criminal charges. Their parents. How would their elderly parents react to learning their older daughter had been stealing from their disabled younger daughter? "Does she know about the investigation?" "Not yet. We'll be executing a search warrant on her home and business this afternoon. She'll be arrested tomorrow morning." Agent Torres leaned forward. "Miss Chen, I need to warn you. She might try to contact you once she realizes we're onto her. She might try to convince you not to cooperate with the investigation, or she might attempt to manipulate you using your relationship. Don't engage with her. Any contact should go through your attorney." "I don't have an attorney." "We can provide you with referrals to lawyers who specialize in fraud cases and disability rights. You may want to consider a civil suit to recover damages beyond what the criminal case addresses." Maya nodded numbly. The practical details felt overwhelming. Attorneys and civil suits and criminal proceedings, all because the person she'd trusted most had decided Maya's survival wasn't as important as Jessica's luxury purchases. Miss Chen, do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight? Family or friends who can provide support during this process? Maya almost laughed. Jessica had been her primary support system. Their parents lived in Arizona and were in their 70s with health problems of their own. Maya's college friends had drifted away after her accident, partly because her cognitive changes made social interaction difficult, and partly because her limited income meant she couldn't participate in the dinners out and weekend trips that had once bonded them. "I'll be fine in my apartment," Maya said, though she wasn't sure she meant it. "I'm concerned about your safety and well-being. This kind of betrayal by a family member can be particularly traumatic, especially given your current vulnerabilities." Agent Torres handed Maya a business card. "This is the number for a counselor who specializes in financial exploitation of disabled individuals. I'd strongly encourage you to make an appointment." Maya left the Social Security building feeling like she was walking through a dream. The November air was sharp and bright, but she felt cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. She sat on a bench outside the building and called another taxi, then sat staring at her phone. She had 17 text messages from Jessica, all sent in the past 2 hours. As Maya read them, she could see the progression from normalcy to panic. "Hope your day is going well."
Tried calling, but it went to voicemail. Everything okay? Maya, please call me back. I'm getting worried. Something weird is happening with my bank accounts. Are you having any problems with yours? Maya, call me now. Something is very wrong. The police were just at my house. They had a search warrant. What is going on? I know you're getting these messages. Please call me. We need to talk before you do something you'll regret. The last message had been sent 10 minutes ago. Maya, I love you and I can explain everything. Don't let them turn you against me. Family is all we have. Maya turned off her phone and sat on the bench until her taxi arrived. During the ride home, she stared out the window at the city she'd lived in her entire life, the place that had once felt familiar and safe. Now everything looked different, like she was seeing it through new eyes. The driver tried to make conversation, but Maya couldn't focus on small talk. Her mind kept circling back to one question. How long had Jessica been planning this? Had it started after the accident, when Jessica saw Maya's vulnerabilities as an opportunity? Or had it begun even earlier, perhaps with smaller manipulations that Maya had been too grateful or too trusting to recognize? Maya thought about all the times Jessica had insisted on handling paperwork, all the conversations about Maya's limitations, all the subtle suggestions that Maya might be overwhelmed by managing her finances independently. She remembered Jessica asking detailed questions about Maya's daily routines, her medication schedules, her memory problems. At the time, it had felt like carrying attention from a devoted sister. Now it felt like reconnaissance. The taxi pulled up to Maya's building, and she paid the driver with bills from her rapidly dwindling cash. She walked slowly up the path to her apartment, keys ready, but stopped when she saw someone sitting on her front step. It was Derek, Jessica's husband, still wearing his business suit but looking haggard and 10 years older than when Maya had seen him at Thanksgiving last year. "Maya, we need to talk." Derek stood as Maya approached, his normally perfect appearance disheveled. His designer tie was loosened, his usually immaculate hair mussed as if he'd been running his hands through it. Maya had known Derek for 12 years, since he and Jessica had started dating in college, but she'd never seen him look so rattled. "Derek, thank God you're here. I've been waiting for almost 2 hours. The kids are at school, thank God. But Jessica, she's been arrested. They came to the house with a search warrant and took boxes of files, her computer, her phone. I don't understand what's happening." Maya fumbled with her keys, her hands shaking from more than just the cold. "Derek, I can't talk about this. Derek, I can't talk about this. My attorney said." "You have an attorney?" "Derek, I can't talk about this." Maya, what is going on? Jessica is hysterical. She keeps saying there's been some mistake, that you'll explain everything. She says you asked her to help with your disability payments. Maya finally got her door open and stepped inside, but didn't invite Derek in. He followed anyway, closing the door behind him and looking around her small apartment with obvious discomfort. Derek had only been here once before, shortly after Maya moved in, and his reaction then was polite but clearly judgmental. Today he seemed to see the space
Differently, the carefully organized medication schedule on the wall, the mobility aids neatly arranged by the door, the simple but clean efficiency of someone living on $1,247 a month. Derek, your wife has been stealing my disability money for months. She forged documents to have herself appointed as my representative payee, then used my benefits for spa visits and fancy dinners while I've been living on ramen noodles and wondering how I'm going to make rent. Derek sank into Maya's single chair, his face pale. That's impossible. Jessica makes good money. We're not struggling financially. Then why did she do it? Maya's voice rose, surprising them both. She rarely raised her voice anymore. The brain injury had left her with difficulty regulating emotions, and she'd learned to stay quiet rather than risk inappropriate outbursts. But the question had been building inside her all day, and now it exploded out with all the fury she'd been suppressing. I don't know, Derek whispered. Maya, I swear to you, I had no idea. Jessica handles most of our finances. She mentioned that she was helping you with some paperwork, but I thought she meant organizing medical records or insurance claims. Maya pulled out the bank statements Agent Torres had given her and spread them across her small table. Look at these. October 15th, $150 at Bella Vista Salon. That's the day she got her hair done for your company party, isn't it? November 2nd, $85 at Roberto's Fine Dining. That was your anniversary dinner. Derek stared at the papers, his face growing paler with each line item. Oh, God. Oh, God, Maya, I had no idea. She paid for those things with our joint credit card. I never thought... Why would she need to steal money when we have our own? Because she could, Maya said flatly. Because I trusted her completely, and she knew I wouldn't question small discrepancies. Because she understood my cognitive limitations better than anyone and knew how to exploit them. Derek stood abruptly and walked to Maya's small window, staring out at the parking lot. The girls don't know yet. Emma and Sophie, they adore Jessica. She's been the perfect mother, Maya. She volunteers at their school. She organizes fundraisers. She's room mom for both their classes. How am I supposed to explain to two teenage girls that their mother is a criminal? Maya felt a stab of sympathy for her nieces, but it was quickly overwhelmed by anger. How was I supposed to explain to my landlord that I couldn't make rent because my sister was using my disability money for manicures? How was I supposed to explain to my doctor's office that I couldn't afford my medication copays because Jessica decided she deserved my survival money more than I did? Maya, please. I know you're angry and you have every right to be, but Jessica is sick. She's been under tremendous pressure at work and she's been seeing a therapist for anxiety. Maybe she had some kind of breakdown. Stop. Maya's voice was sharp. Don't you dare try to make excuses for her. This wasn't a breakdown or a momentary lapse in judgment. She spent weeks planning this fraud. She forged my signature on legal documents. She studied my routines and my limitations to figure out how to steal from me without getting caught. This was calculated and cruel. Derek turned back to face her, tears in his eyes. What can I do to make this right? How much did she take? I'll write you a check right now for every penny. It's not about the money anymore, Derek. It's about trust. It's about the fact that when I was at my most vulnerable, the person I counted on most was systematically exploiting that vulnerability. Maya's voice cracked. Do you know what it's like to live on disability?
To have your entire life reduced to $1,247 a month and know that's probably all you'll ever have again? To lose your career, your independence, your sense of self, and then discover that the person helping you rebuild was actually tearing you down? Derek wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Maya, I'm so sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am truly, deeply sorry. Jessica has always been competitive, always needed to be the best at everything, but I never thought she'd do something like this. Especially not to you.
The comment about Jessica's competitiveness sparked a memory. Maya walked to her desk and pulled out a photo album, one of the few possessions she'd kept from her old life. She flipped through pages until she found what she was looking for, a photo from their childhood, maybe 10 years old. Jessica, even at 12, looked poised and confident. Maya, 2 years younger, was grinning at the camera with missing front teeth and messy hair. "She was always jealous when I got attention," Maya said quietly. "When I won the spelling bee in 5th grade, she told everyone I had cheated. When I got into the honors program in high school and she didn't, she spread rumors that I was sleeping with the guidance counselor. When I got promoted to senior counselor at the college, she made snide comments about nepotism and lowered standards." Derek shook his head. "That doesn't sound like the Jessica I know." "Because you knew successful Jessica, professional Jessica, Jessica who had everything she wanted and didn't need to compete with her brain-damaged little sister." Maya closed the photo album. "But then I had my accident. And suddenly, I was getting attention again, sympathy, help, people rallying around me. And Jessica couldn't stand it." "You really think she did this out of jealousy?" Maya considered the question. "I think she did it because she could, because she saw an opportunity to take something from me while positioning herself as the caring sister who was helping me disabled sister. She got to play the martyr. Poor Jessica, sacrificing her time to help her disabled sister, while literally profiting from my disabilities." Derek's phone buzzed with a text message. He looked at it and his face went white. "She's been released on bail? She's on her way here." Maya's heart rate spiked. "She can't come here. Agent Torres told me not to have any contact with her." "Maya, she's my wife. She's the mother of my children. I can't just abandon her, even if what you're saying is true." "What I'm saying is true. I have bank records, surveillance footage, forged documents." "I believe you," Derek said quickly. "I do. But she's still family. She's still the woman I married, the mother of Emma and Sophie. There has to be some explanation, some way to understand how this happened." Maya stared at Derek, seeing him clearly for the first time. He was a good man, a kind man, but he was also weak. He would choose the path of least resistance, the option that allowed him to maintain his comfortable life and his image of his family. He would find ways to minimize Jessica's crimes, to reframe them as mistakes or misunderstandings, because facing the truth would require him to make difficult choices about his marriage and his children's future. "Get out," Maya said quietly. "Maya, please. Get out of my apartment, Derek. And when Jessica gets here, you tell her that if she comes near me, I'll call the police. She's already facing federal charges. She doesn't want to add stalking and harassment to her list of crimes." Derek stood slowly, looking around the small apartment one more time. "Maya, whatever happens with the legal stuff, I want you to know that Emma and Sophie love you. You're still their aunt. You're still family." "No," Maya said firmly. "Family doesn't steal from family. Family doesn't exploit disability benefits. Family doesn't forge documents and commit fraud. Jessica stopped being my family the moment she decided my survival was worth less than her luxury purchases." Derek left without another word, and Maya immediately locked the door behind him. She pulled out her phone and turned it back on, then immediately regretted it. 43 new messages from Jessica, the tone growing increasingly desperate and angry.
"Maya, Derek told me what happened. This is all a misunderstanding. You have to talk to me before this goes any further. I was only trying to help you. You know how confused you get with paperwork. This is all my fault. I should have explained better what I was doing. Maya, I'm your sister. We can work this out without involving lawyers and police. Stop ignoring me. I know you're reading these. Fine. Be ungrateful. See how far you get without family support. You always were jealous of my success. Now you're trying to destroy my life. I hope you're happy. Emma is crying because kids at school are saying her mom is a criminal. You're destroying our family over money. Mom and Dad are going to be heartbroken. Maya turned off the phone again and walked to her window. Derek's BMW was still in the parking lot, and as she watched, another car pulled up beside it, Jessica's white Lexus SUV. Maya's breath caught as she watched her sister emerge from the vehicle. Even in crisis, Jessica looked put together. Designer jeans, a cashmere sweater, leather boots that probably cost more than Maya's monthly rent. Jessica walked directly to Derek, and Maya could see them talking animatedly through the car windows. Derek was gesturing toward Maya's apartment, and Jessica was shaking her head vigorously. Their body language was tense, urgent. After several minutes, Jessica broke away from Derek and started walking toward Maya's building. Maya quickly closed the blinds and stepped away from the window. Her heart was pounding, and she felt the familiar fog of cognitive overload starting to descend. Too much stress, too much emotion, too many complex decisions to process. Her brain injury made it difficult to cope with high-stress situations, and this was beyond anything she'd experienced since the accident itself. The knock on her door was sharp and insistent. Maya, I know you're in there. We need to talk. This is all a huge misunderstanding, and I can explain everything. Maya didn't respond. She sat on her bed and pulled her knees to her chest, making herself as small as possible. Maya, please, I'm your sister. I love you. I was only trying to help. You know how hard it is for you to manage complicated paperwork. I thought I was making things easier for you. The lies were breathtaking in their audacity. Maya had never asked for help managing her disability payments. She had been successfully managing them for over a year before Jessica's help began. Maya, if you don't open the store, I'm going to ask Mr. Kowalski to let me in. I'm worried about your mental state. You're not thinking clearly. The threat made Maya's blood boil. Jessica was trying to use Maya's cognitive issues against her, just as she had when she'd convinced Social Security that Maya was incapable of managing her own finances. It was a pattern. Jessica positioning herself as the competent, reliable sister while portraying Maya as confused and unreliable. Maya heard footsteps moving away from her door, then voices in the hallway. Jessica was talking to someone, probably Mr. Kowalski, who lived in the main part of the house and served as the building's informal manager. Maya couldn't make out the words, but Jessica's tone was smooth, persuasive, concerned. She was undoubtedly explaining that her poor brain-injured sister was having some kind of episode and needed family intervention. But Mr. Kowalski surprised Maya. His voice, heavily accented but firm, carried clearly through the thin walls. Miss Chen says she doesn't want visitors. I don't let people into apartments when tenant says no. You have problem with your sister, you work it out somewhere else. Sir, I'm concerned about her mental health. She has a brain injury, and sometimes she doesn't make good decisions. Miss Chen pays rent on time, keeps apartment clean, causes no trouble. She seems fine to me. You need to leave now, or I call police. Maya felt a rush of gratitude toward her elderly landlord. He barely spoke English and had certainly never dealt with family drama like this, but he understood basic human decency and tenant rights. She heard Jessica's heels clicking angrily across the wooden floor of the main hallway, then the slam of the front door. Through her window blinds, Maya watched Jessica storm back to her car, her perfect composure finally cracking. She was talking rapidly on her phone, probably to her lawyer, Maya realized.
Derek approached Jessica's car, but she waved him away dismissively. Maya watched as Jessica's face contorted with rage, her mouth moving in what were clearly curses and threats. This was a side of Jessica that Maya had seen glimpses of over the years, the controlled, manipulative anger that emerged when Jessica didn't get her way. After several more minutes of heated phone conversation, Jessica hung up and sat in her car, staring directly at Maya's apartment. Even through the closed blinds, Maya felt exposed, vulnerable. Jessica knew her schedule, her habits, her vulnerabilities. She knew when Maya went to doctor appointments, when she did laundry in the building's basement, when she walked to the small grocery store 2 blocks away. Maya realized with growing dread that this was far from over. Jessica wouldn't simply accept the consequences of her actions and move on. She would fight, manipulate, and try to control the narrative just as she had controlled everything else. And Maya, with her cognitive limitations and her isolation, would be fighting that battle largely alone. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you're enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. The afternoon stretched into evening, with Jessica's car remaining in the parking lot like a white shark circling its prey. Maya tried to distract herself by organizing her medications and reviewing the documents Agent Torres had given her, but her concentration was shattered. The brain injury had left her with limited cognitive resources, and the stress of the confrontation had depleted them entirely. Around 6 o'clock, Maya's phone rang. The caller ID showed her parents' number in Arizona. Maya's stomach dropped as she realized Jessica had undoubtedly called them with her version of events. "Maya, honey, what's going on?" Her mother's voice was strained with worry. "Jessica called us crying, saying there's been some terrible mistake and you're not speaking to her. She says the police came to her house over some paperwork mix-up." Maya closed her eyes and tried to find the words to explain the situation without overwhelming her elderly parents. Her father had just had heart surgery 3 months ago, and her mother was dealing with early-stage dementia. They didn't need the stress, but they also deserved to know the truth about their older daughter. "Mom, Jessica has been stealing my disability money. She forged documents to have herself appointed as my representative payee, then used my benefits for personal expenses. The Social Security Administration has been investigating for weeks." "That's impossible, sweetheart. Jessica would never. She's been so worried about you, so attentive. She calls us every week to update you on how you're doing." Maya felt the familiar frustration of not being believed, of being seen as the unreliable narrator of her own life. "Mom, I have bank records. I have surveillance footage. I have forged documents with my signature. This isn't a misunderstanding." "Honey, you know sometimes your memory isn't. Since your accident, you've had some confusion about things. Are you sure you didn't ask Jessica to help with your finances and then forget?"
The question hit Maya like a physical blow. Even her own mother was questioning her credibility, suggesting that her brain injury made her an unreliable witness to her own exploitation. It was exactly the kind of gaslighting that had allowed Jessica's fraud to succeed in the first place. "I'm sure, Mom. I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Maya's voice was steady, despite the pain of not being believed by her own mother. "Jessica is going to be charged with federal crimes. This isn't something I imagined or forgot." Her mother was quiet for a long moment. "Maya, your father and we can't handle much stress right now. His heart and my memory problems, we just can't deal with family conflict." "This isn't family conflict, Mom. This is a crime. Jessica stole money I need to survive." "Well, maybe you girls can work it out together. Jessica mentioned that she might be able to pay back any money if there really was a mix-up." "Mom, stop." Maya's voice was sharp. "This wasn't a mix-up. Jessica systematically defrauded the Social Security Administration and stole benefits from her disabled sister. She's not the victim here. I am." Her mother started crying. The overwhelmed, helpless crying of an elderly woman who couldn't process complex emotional situations anymore. "I just want my girls to get along. I just want our family to be okay." Maya felt the weight of protecting her parents from the truth while also standing up for herself.
It was an impossible position, and she realized it was exactly where Jessica had intended to put her. By involving their vulnerable elderly parents, Jessica had created another layer of manipulation. Maya would look like the bad daughter if she insisted on pursuing justice against Jessica. "Mom, I love you and Dad, and I don't want to stress you out. But I can't pretend this didn't happen. Jessica committed serious crimes, and there will be consequences." After her mother hung up, still crying and confused, Maya sat in her dark apartment and tried to process the magnitude of what Jessica had done. It wasn't just financial fraud. Jessica had systematically destroyed Maya's support network, turned their parents against her, and positioned herself as the reasonable, caring sister while portraying Maya as mentally unstable and unreliable. Maya realized that Jessica's theft of her disability benefits was just the beginning. The real crime was the theft of her credibility, her relationships, and her sense of safety in the world. Jessica had taken advantage of Maya's cognitive limitations not just to steal money, but to steal her voice. As darkness fell outside, Jessica's car finally pulled away from the parking lot. But Maya knew this was just a tactical retreat. Jessica was regrouping, consulting with lawyers, crafting a defense strategy that would undoubtedly center on Maya's brain injury and cognitive issues. She would paint herself as a concerned sister who was trying to help, and Maya as a confused, ungrateful woman who was misinterpreting kindness as exploitation. Maya looked around her small apartment, her sanctuary, her symbol of independence, and wondered how long she'd be able to keep it. Even with her benefits restored, the legal battles ahead would be expensive and emotionally draining. Her cognitive resources were already stretched thin, and the stress of fighting Jessica would likely exacerbate her symptoms. But as Maya prepared for bed, she felt something she hadn't experienced since her accident: righteous anger. For 2 years, she'd accepted her limitations, adapted to her new reality, and been grateful for any help or kindness. She'd made herself small and accommodating, always aware that she was now dependent on others' goodwill. But Jessica's betrayal had awakened something fierce in Maya, a determination to fight back, to reclaim her voice, and to prove that cognitive disability didn't make her powerless. Jessica had underestimated her little sister's resilience, and that would be her biggest mistake. Maya double-checked her door locks and turned off the lights, but sleep was impossible. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new confrontations, new attempts by Jessica to manipulate the situation. But tonight, Maya planned her counterattack. She would not be the victim of her sister's greed any longer.
Outside, the November wind rattled her windows like Jessica's rage against her door, but Maya's apartment remained secure, and for the first time in months, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged, in her own space, fighting for her own life, refusing to be anyone's victim ever again. Maya woke before dawn to the sound of her phone buzzing with an incoming call. The number was unfamiliar, but the area code was local. Still groggy and disoriented, she answered without thinking. "Maya Chen?" The voice was crisp, professional, unfamiliar. "Yes?" "This is Jennifer Walsh from Channel 13 News. We're doing a story about disability benefit fraud, and we understand you're the victim in a case involving your sister. Would you be willing to speak with us on camera?" Maya's stomach dropped. "How did you get this number? How do you know about—" "Court records are public, Miss Chen. Your sister was arraigned this morning, and the case details are quite compelling. A successful pharmaceutical executive stealing from her brain-injured sister's disability benefits. It's exactly the kind of story our viewers care about." Maya hung up without another word, her hands shaking. She immediately called Agent Torres, who answered on the second ring, despite the early hour. "Miss Chen, what's wrong?" "The media knows. A reporter just called me wanting to do a story about Jessica. They said she was arraigned this morning?" Agent Torres sighed. "Yes. The arraignment was moved up due to flight risk concerns. Your sister attempted to book a flight to her company's London office yesterday evening. We had to arrest her at the airport." Maya sank onto her bed, the implications washing over her. She was trying to run?
It appears so. Her passport was flagged and she was taken into custody with a suitcase of cash and financial documents. The judge denied bail this morning due to the flight risk and the sophisticated nature of the fraud. But the reporter said court records were public. They are, but media attention this early is unusual. I suspect someone contacted the press. Agent Torres paused meaningfully. Miss Chen, you should know that your sister's attorney held a press conference outside the courthouse an hour ago. They're claiming this is a family misunderstanding that's been blown out of proportion by an overzealous investigation. Maya felt sick. What did they say? I'll send you the video link, but the gist is that your sister was trying to help you manage finances you couldn't handle due to your brain injury, and that you're now confused about what you authorized. They're portraying her as the devoted sister who's being persecuted for trying to care for her disabled sibling. The manipulation was breathtaking and predictable. Jessica was using Maya's disability as both a justification for her crimes and a weapon against Maya's credibility. She was painting herself as the long-suffering caregiver and Maya as the ungrateful, mentally incompetent victim who didn't understand her own situation. Maya's phone started ringing again, different numbers, one after the other. She turned it off and sat in the silence of her apartment, trying to process the nightmare her life had become. Jessica wasn't just fighting the criminal charges, she was waging a public relations war designed to destroy Maya's reputation and credibility.
There was a gentle knock at Maya's door, followed by Mr. Kowalski's heavily accented voice. "Ms. Chen, you okay? There are news people outside wanting to talk to you." Maya looked through her window blinds and felt her heart sink. 3 news vans were parked on the street, with reporters and camera crews setting up equipment. Neighbors were gathering on their porches, curious about the commotion. Maya's quiet, anonymous life was over. "I'm okay, Mr. Kowalski. Thank you for checking. I told them they cannot come on property without permission, but they are waiting on street." Maya realized she was trapped in her own apartment. She had a doctor's appointment that afternoon, a physical therapy session tomorrow, grocery shopping that couldn't be postponed much longer. But leaving meant running a gauntlet of reporters who would want to film her, question her, and broadcast her cognitive limitations to the world. She turned her phone back on long enough to call Agent Torres again. "I need help. The media is camped outside my building, and I can't leave without being harassed. I'll send a victim advocate to assist you. In the meantime, don't speak to any reporters without legal representation. Anything you say will be twisted to support your sister's defense strategy." The victim advocate, a soft-spoken woman named Lisa Park, arrived 2 hours later through Mr. Kowalski's back entrance. She helped Maya craft a brief written statement declining interviews and asserting Maya's right to privacy as a crime victim and disabled individual. But the media presence only intensified as the day progressed. By afternoon, Maya's story was trending on social media. Someone had leaked her photo from the college website where she used to work, along with details about her accident and disability claim. The comment sections were brutal battlegrounds between people who supported Maya and others who believed Jessica's narrative about a confused woman falsely accusing her caring sister. Look at her work history. She was a disability counselor. She knows how to game the system. Classic case of someone with brain injury not understanding what they agreed to. This sister probably saved her from financial ruin, and this is how she gets thanked? Why would a successful executive need to steal from someone on disability? Makes no sense. Follow the money. There's always more to these stories. Maya felt exposed and violated in ways that reminded her of the aftermath of her accident, when she'd lost control over her own body and life. Now she was losing control over her own narrative, watching strangers debate her mental capacity and credibility based on incomplete information and ableist assumptions. But there were also messages of support. Other disability benefit recipients shared their own stories of financial exploitation by family members. Advocates for people with brain injuries explained how cognitive limitations made victims particularly vulnerable to sophisticated fraud. Social workers and attorneys provided context about the prevalence of financial abuse targeting disabled individuals. Lisa Park helped Maya understand her legal options beyond the criminal case against Jessica. You can file a civil lawsuit for damages, including pain and suffering, legal fees, and punitive damages. Given the sophisticated nature of the fraud and the vulnerable victim status, a jury might award significant compensation. I don't want money. I want my life back. I want to be able to leave my apartment without reporters shoving microphones in my face. I want my parents to believe me instead of thinking I'm confused. Unfortunately, once a case becomes public, you lose control over the narrative, but we can fight back strategically. There are journalists who specialize in disability rights issues, reporters who would tell your story accurately instead of sensationalizing it. Maya spent the evening reading everything she could find about her case online. Jessica's defense attorney had been busy, giving interviews that painted a picture of a successful woman driven to help her struggling sister, only to be blindsided by false accusations. The attorney repeatedly emphasized Maya's brain injury, her cognitive limitations, her dependence on others for help with complex tasks. "My client has dedicated her life to caring for others," the attorney said in one interview. "She's a devoted mother, a successful professional, and a loving sister who saw her siblings struggling with the complex bureaucracy of disability benefits. Her only crime was caring too much and not documenting every step of the help she provided."
The attorney never explicitly said Maya was lying, but the implication was clear. Brain-injured Maya was confused about what she'd authorized, and Jessica was being persecuted for her kindness. Maya felt rage building in her chest, a clean, focused anger that cut through her usual cognitive fog. She pulled out her laptop and began typing, slowly but steadily, crafting her own statement. If Jessica wanted to fight in the court of public opinion, Maya would give her a fight. She wrote about the reality of living on disability benefits, the careful budgeting, the constant anxiety about money, the way every unexpected expense could trigger a crisis. She described finding her mailbox tampered with, discovering mysterious ATM withdrawals, the horror of learning that someone she trusted completely had been systematically stealing from her. Maya wrote about the ableism inherent in Jessica's defense, the assumption that cognitive disability made her an unreliable narrator of her own experience, the suggestion that she should be grateful for being defrauded because it was done by family. She explained how her brain injury affected her daily life, while emphasizing that it didn't make her stupid, gullible, or incapable of understanding when she was being exploited. Most importantly, Maya wrote about the broader implications of her case. Financial exploitation of disabled individuals was epidemic, she explained, precisely because society assumed disabled people were inherently unreliable and should be grateful for any help they received. Jessica's defense strategy was a textbook example of how abusers use their victims' disabilities as both justification for abuse and protection from consequences. Maya posted her statement on the blog she'd started after her accident to document her recovery process. Within hours, it was being shared across social media platforms, quoted by disability rights organizations, and picked up by journalists covering her story. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Hundreds of comments from other disabled individuals sharing their own stories of financial exploitation, messages from advocates and attorneys offering support, donations to a legal defense fund Maya hadn't even known someone had created on her behalf. But the most meaningful response came from an unexpected source, Dr. Elizabeth Hartman, the neurologist who had treated Maya after her accident. Dr. Hartman posted a detailed explanation of traumatic brain injury and its effects, specifically addressing misconceptions about cognitive disability. Maya Chen was my patient for over a year. I watched her navigate complex medical decisions, insurance appeals, and disability determinations with remarkable insight and determination. Her brain injury affects processing speed and working memory, but it absolutely does not impair her judgment, her understanding of financial matters, or her ability to consent to or refuse help with managing her affairs. Any suggestion that Miss Chen was too cognitively impaired to understand that her benefits were being stolen is both medically inaccurate and deeply offensive. The neurologist's statement was shared thousands of times and cited by major news outlets. Suddenly, the narrative began to shift.
Instead of focusing on Maya's disabilities as evidence of her unreliability, journalists started examining Jessica's sophisticated fraud scheme and the vulnerability of disabled individuals to financial exploitation. Maya received a call from Senator Patricia Williams, the chair of the Senate Aging Committee, who was working on legislation to strengthen protections for vulnerable adults against financial abuse. Ms. Chen, your case highlights exactly the problems we're trying to address. Would you be willing to testify before our committee about your experience? I don't know if I'm the right person for that. Speaking in public, especially about complex issues, is difficult for me since my injury.
That's exactly why you're the perfect person. We need lawmakers to understand that cognitive disability doesn't make someone powerless or unreliable. Your voice, your experience, could help protect thousands of other disabled individuals from similar exploitation. Maya agreed to consider testifying, but first she had to get through Jessica's preliminary hearing, scheduled for the following week. The prosecution had built a strong case: bank records, surveillance footage, forged documents, digital evidence from Jessica's seized devices. But Jessica's defense team was clearly planning to put Maya's cognitive abilities on trial, to suggest that she was too impaired to be a reliable witness against her own sister. Maya spent hours preparing with the prosecutor, a sharp woman named Rachel Martinez, who specialized in fraud cases involving vulnerable victims. They practiced direct examination, cross-examination, potential challenges to Maya's testimony based on her brain injury. "They're going to try to rattle you," Martinez warned. "They'll ask about your memory problems, your difficulty processing information, your dependence on others for help. They want you to appear confused or unreliable on the stand." What if I do get confused? What if I can't find the right words or my thoughts get tangled? Then we take breaks. We use the accommodations the court is required to provide, and we remember that your cognitive challenges don't make you a liar or an unreliable witness. You're systematically defrauded by someone you trusted, and that's true regardless of your disability status. The night before the hearing, Maya sat in her apartment preparing herself mentally for the confrontation ahead. She would have to face Jessica in court, look at her sister while testifying about her betrayal. She would have to answer invasive questions about her cognitive limitations while maintaining her dignity and credibility. Maya pulled out the photo album again, looking at pictures of herself and Jessica as children. In one photo, they were building a snowman together, both laughing at something outside the camera's view. In another, teenage Jessica was helping Maya with algebra homework, patient and encouraging. The woman in those photos seemed incapable of the cruelty Maya had experienced, but Maya now understood that Jessica's kindness had always been conditional, available when it served Jessica's interests, withdrawn when Maya needed more than Jessica wanted to give. The preliminary hearing would determine whether there was enough evidence to proceed to trial, but Maya knew it was really about something larger. It was about whether society would believe disabled individuals when they reported abuse, whether cognitive limitations made someone an unreliable narrator of their own exploitation, whether family relationships could excuse systematic financial fraud. Maya looked around her small apartment, the medication organizers, the mobility aids, the carefully arranged support systems that helped her maintain independence despite her limitations. This space represented her determination to build a meaningful life after devastating injuries. Jessica had tried to destroy that independence by stealing the financial foundation that made it possible, but she had underestimated Maya's resilience and the power of truth to prevail over manipulation. Tomorrow, Maya would walk into that courtroom and reclaim her voice. She would speak for herself and for every disabled individual who had been told their limitations made them unreliable witnesses to their own exploitation. She would prove that cognitive disability didn't make someone powerless, and that sophisticated fraud was still fraud, regardless of the victim's vulnerabilities. Maya set her alarm and tried to sleep, knowing that tomorrow would be one of the most difficult days of her life. But for the first time since discovering Jessica's betrayal, she felt ready for the fight ahead. The courthouse lobby buzzed with activity at 8:30 in the morning.
Maya arrived with Lisa Park, her victim advocate, and Rachel Martinez, the prosecutor. They'd entered through a side entrance to avoid the media circus, but Maya could still hear the commotion outside. Reporters shouting questions, camera crews jostling for position. Maya wore her best outfit again, the navy blazer and black slacks, but she'd added something new, a small pin on her lapel that read "Survivor" in silver letters. Dr. Hartman had sent it to her with a note. "You are not defined by what was done to you, but how you choose to respond."
The courtroom was packed. Maya recognized some faces from the news coverage: disability rights advocates, other fraud victims, journalists covering the case. In the front row sat Derek, with their 2 teenage daughters, Emma and Sophie. The girls looked confused and frightened, stealing glances at Maya with expressions she couldn't quite read. Then the bailiff announced Jessica's entrance, and Maya's breath caught. Her sister looked different, thinner, paler, her usually perfect appearance slightly disheveled. Jessica wore a conservative gray suit and minimal makeup, clearly styled by her defense team to project humility and vulnerability. When their eyes met across the courtroom, Jessica's expression was pleading, desperate, but Maya saw calculation beneath the surface. Judge Margaret Sullivan called the hearing to order. She was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Maya felt a flicker of hope. This judge wouldn't be easily manipulated by Jessica's performance. Rachel Martinez presented the prosecution's case methodically. Bank records showing the systematic theft, surveillance footage of Jessica using Maya's cloned debit card, digital evidence from Jessica's seized devices, including searches for how to become representative payee and disability fraud penalties that proved premeditation. The forged signature was particularly damning. A handwriting expert testified that the signature on the representative payee application showed clear signs of forgery. Multiple attempts to match Maya's handwriting, practice signatures found in Jessica's desk, subtle differences in pen pressure and letter formation that indicated deception. Then came Maya's testimony. She walked to the witness stand slowly, her cognitive processing requiring extra time to manage the stress and sensory overload of the packed courtroom. Rachel Martinez had prepared her for this moment, but nothing could fully prepare someone for facing their abuser in public while having their credibility questioned. "Please state your name for the record," Martinez began gently. "Maya Chen." Her voice was steady, stronger than she had expected. "Miss Chen, can you describe your relationship with the defendant, Jessica Chen Morrison?" "She's my older sister. She was my older sister." Maya's eyes found Jessica's across the courtroom. "I trusted her completely." Rachel Martinez guided Maya through her story methodically. The accident that changed her life, the long process of applying for disability benefits, Jessica's offers of help that Maya had largely declined, wanting to maintain her independence, the discovery that her benefits were being stolen. "Miss Chen, did you ever ask your sister to manage your disability payments?" "No, never." "Did you ever sign documents authorizing her to become your representative payee?" "No. I was managing my own finances successfully. I never needed or wanted a representative payee." "How did the theft of your benefits affect you?" Maya took a breath, organizing her thoughts carefully. The brain injury made it challenging to express complex emotions under stress, but this was too important to rush. "I couldn't afford my medication copays. I was eating 1 meal a day to save money. I was terrified I'd lose my apartment, the first place that felt like home since my accident. But worse than the money was realizing that the person I trusted most in the world was destroying my life while pretending to care about me."
When Jessica's defense attorney, a slick man named Richard Brennan, approached for cross-examination, Maya steeled herself. She'd practiced for this moment, knowing he would try to portray her as confused and unreliable. "Ms. Chen, You suffered a traumatic brain injury, is that correct? Yes. This injury affects your memory and cognitive processing? It affects processing speed and working memory, but not my judgment or understanding of financial matters. Brennan smiled condescendingly. But you do struggle with complex paperwork and bureaucratic processes. I process information more slowly than I used to. That doesn't make me incapable of managing my own affairs. Ms. Chen, isn't it true that you've forgotten medical appointments, missed bill payments, and struggled to understand insurance documents since your accident? Maya felt her anger rising, but she kept her voice controlled. Yes, I've had to develop new organizational systems to manage my limitations, but I've never forgotten authorizing someone to steal my benefits. My client wasn't stealing, Miss Chen. She was trying to help a sister who was struggling. Objection, Martinez interjected. Argumentative. Sustained, Judge Sullivan ruled sharply. Mr. Brennan, stick to questions. Brennan tried a different approach. Ms. Chen, you lived in poverty while your sister lived comfortably. Isn't it possible you've convinced yourself she owed you something? The question was designed to make Maya appear greedy and vindictive, but it backfired. Maya's response was clear and devastating. Mr. Brennan, I lived on disability benefits because I'm disabled. My sister lived comfortably because she has a successful career. I never expected her to support me financially. I only expected her not to steal from me. The cross-examination continued for another hour, but Maya held her ground. Every attempt to portray her as confused or unreliable was met with clear, specific responses that demonstrated her understanding of the situation. When Brennan suggested she was mistaken about not authorizing the representative payee, Maya calmly requested to see the forged document and pointed out 3 specific ways the signature differed from her actual handwriting. The most powerful moment came when Brennan asked why Maya would destroy her family over money. Maya looked directly at Jessica before answering. I didn't destroy our family. My sister did that when she decided my survival was worth less than her manicures. After Maya's testimony, Dr. Hartman took the stand to explain traumatic brain injury and its effects. Her testimony systematically dismantled every assumption underlying Jessica's defense, that cognitive disability meant incompetence, that processing difficulties indicated poor judgment, that memory challenges made someone an unreliable witness. Ms. Chen's brain injury affects specific cognitive functions. It does not affect her ability to understand right from wrong, to recognize when she's been harmed, or to give reliable testimony about her experiences. Suggesting otherwise perpetuates dangerous stereotypes about people with cognitive disabilities. The defense's case was weak. Jessica's attorney called character witnesses who testified about her volunteer work and devotion to her daughters, but couldn't explain why a successful woman would need to steal from her disabled sister. They presented no evidence that Maya had actually requested help managing her finances, no documentation of confusion or incompetence that would justify appointing a representative payee.
Jessica herself chose not to testify, a decision that spoke volumes about the weakness of her position. During closing arguments, Rachel Martinez was devastating in her precision. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about one simple fact. Jessica Chen Morrison systematically stole money from her disabled sister while positioning herself as a caring caregiver. She exploited Maya's trust, her cognitive limitations, and society's prejudices about disability to commit sophisticated fraud. The defense wants you to believe that Maya is too cognitively impaired to be a reliable witness. But Maya managed her own finances for over a year before this fraud began. She lived independently, made medical decisions, navigated complex bureaucracies. Her brain injury affects processing speed, not judgment.
The defense wants you to believe this was a misunderstanding, but the evidence shows careful planning. Jessica researched representative payee procedures. She practiced forging Maya's signature. She timed her thefts to avoid detection. This wasn't confusion, it was calculated exploitation. Most importantly, the defense wants you to believe that family relationships excuse financial abuse. They don't. Love doesn't justify theft. Concern doesn't justify fraud. Being someone's sister doesn't give you the right to steal their survival money. Jessica's attorney made a final desperate appeal to emotion, painting Jessica as a devoted sister overwhelmed by trying to help her struggling sibling. But without evidence to support his claims, his arguments rang hollow. Judge Sullivan deliberated for less than an hour. When she returned, her expression was stern. The court finds probable cause to believe that Jessica Chen Morrison committed Social Security fraud, identity theft, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. The defendant will be bound over for trial on all charges. Jessica's face crumpled as the bailiff approached with handcuffs. She looked toward Maya one last time, her expression a mixture of desperation and rage. Maya met her gaze steadily, feeling something she hadn't experienced in years: complete confidence in her own perception of reality. Outside the courthouse, Maya faced the media for the first time. With Lisa Park beside her for support, she read a brief statement she'd prepared. Today's ruling confirms what I've known all along, that I was the victim of systematic financial fraud by someone I trusted completely. This case is more about money. It's about whether our society will protect vulnerable individuals from exploitation or whether disability makes someone fair game for abuse. I want other disabled individuals to know that your limitations don't make you powerless. Your need for accommodations doesn't make you unreliable. If someone is exploiting your trust and stealing from you, you have the right to seek justice regardless of your disability status. I also want families to understand that love and concern don't justify taking control of someone's life without their consent. Disabled people deserve the same autonomy and respect as everyone else. The questions from reporters were intense but respectful. Maya answered carefully with Lisa's help when her cognitive processing slowed under stress. The story that emerged in news coverage that evening was dramatically different from the initial narratives. Maya was portrayed as a brave survivor fighting back against exploitation, not a confused woman falsely accusing her caring sister. 3 months later, Jessica pleaded guilty to all charges as part of a plea agreement. She received 2 years in federal prison, 5 years of probation, and was ordered to pay full restitution plus penalties. The sentence was lighter than it could have been, but Maya had pushed for the plea deal to avoid a lengthy trial that would further traumatize Jessica's daughters. Derek filed for divorce 2 weeks after Jessica's guilty plea. He visited Maya once to apologize and arrange for the girls to maintain contact with their aunt if they chose. Emma and Sophie
Sent Maya a card on her birthday, awkward but genuine. Signed, "Love, your nieces who are sorry." Maya's parents finally accepted the truth about Jessica, though the revelation devastated them. Their phone calls with Maya became more frequent, more genuine, as they worked to rebuild trust and understanding. 6 months after the preliminary hearing, Maya testified before Senator Williams' committee about financial exploitation of disabled individuals. Her testimony, delivered clearly and powerfully despite her cognitive challenges, helped shape legislation that strengthened protections for vulnerable adults and improved oversight of representative payee programs. Maya's blog about her experience became a resource for other exploitation victims. She partnered with disability rights organizations to educate families and caregivers about appropriate support versus exploitation. Speaking engagements followed, carefully managed to accommodate her limitations, but powerful in their impact. The civil lawsuit against Jessica was settled out of court for a significant sum that gave Maya financial security for the first time since her accident. She used part of the money to establish a fund providing legal assistance to disabled individuals facing financial exploitation.
A year after Jessica's sentencing, Maya moved to a better apartment. Still modest, but bright and spacious, with a small garden where she could grow vegetables. She adopted a rescue cat named Justice, whose presence eased the isolation that had plagued her since her accident. Maya's cognitive limitations remained, but she'd learned to work with them rather than being ashamed of them. She used technology to manage her memory issues, took frequent breaks during complex tasks, and asked for accommodations when needed. Most importantly, she surrounded herself with people who understood that needing support didn't make her powerless. Dr. Hartman became not just Maya's neurologist, but a friend and advocate. "You've taught me as much as I've taught you," she told Maya during a routine appointment. "Watching you fight for yourself and others has reminded me why I became a doctor." Maya never spoke to Jessica again. She received letters from prison, apologies, explanations, requests for forgiveness, but Maya didn't respond. She'd learned that forgiveness didn't require reconciliation, and healing didn't require maintaining relationships with people who had harmed her. On the 2-year anniversary of discovering Jessica's betrayal, Maya published a final blog post about her experience. Recovery isn't just about healing from injury or trauma. It's about reclaiming your voice, your truth, your right to determine your own life. For too long, I let other people define what I was capable of, what I deserved, what I should accept. My sister's betrayal was devastating, but it also liberated me from the need to be grateful for scraps of respect and dignity. I learned that my limitations don't make me less worthy of justice, autonomy, or truthful relationships. To other disabled individuals facing exploitation, your voice matters. Your experience is valid. Your limitations don't make you powerless. The people who love you won't exploit your vulnerabilities. They'll help you work around them while respecting your autonomy. To families of disabled individuals, support doesn't mean control. Love doesn't justify taking away someone's agency. The goal should be helping your loved one live their best life according to their own values and choices, not making decisions for them. I'll always grieve the sister I thought I had, but I refuse to grieve the life I've built in the aftermath of her betrayal. Justice isn't just about punishment. It's about truth, accountability, and the restoration of dignity. Today, I have all three. Maya's story became part of disability rights history, cited in legal briefs and academic papers about financial exploitation. But for Maya, the real victory was simpler. She went to sleep each night in her own apartment, paid for with her own money, knowing that she was exactly where she belonged. The phone calls at 3:47 a.m. had stopped. The fear and confusion had been replaced by hard-won wisdom and unshakable self-knowledge. Maya had learned that survival wasn't just about enduring what happened to you. It was about refusing to let other people's actions define your worth or limit your possibilities. She was a survivor, not a victim. And that made all the difference. Your voice matters. Share your own story ideas, connect with other listeners, and become part of a movement that believes every truth deserves to be heard. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel.